some women that wish they could get their hands on me. I know some demons that been trying to...
All right. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dominique McCoy. I'm the Executive Director of the 2 and 3 Project here at the Kirsten Institute of Urban Education, the University of Chicago's Crown School, and I get to play host today. So I get the pleasure of welcoming everybody and saying thank you for joining us for today's Spotlight on supporting college success for Black CPS graduates. I think most people know this, but for folks that are new, our mission here at the 2 and 3 Project is like many folks on today's call. It's focused on strengthening student experiences and outcomes from middle grades all the way through college completion for CPS students. And our approach to that work is really rooted in this idea of using data for inquiry and impact. And to us, we really like to kind of break that idea down around three key beliefs, right? One, when it comes to changing complex systems, like topic we're going to be talking about today, we really believe that you can't change what you can't see, right? So we work really hard to organize quantitative data that helps us understand progress to key milestones along the pathway to college completion, but also qualitative data that helps us better understand student experiences that actually leads to college access and success. We are also big believers that all of the adults in our system that are supporting young people from middle grades through college deserve and need access to high quality research-backed data to help us understand the impact of our efforts, where we're making progress, where we need to try something different in response to that data and also in response to student needs. And then third, we're just big believers that there's no one organization or institution or leader that's going to solve this challenge on their own, right? And so that's why we work to use data to organize conversations like today, to help us spread information, understand what work is happening collectively around the city, and to really focus in on this idea of collective action, right, around this shared work and our shared goals. So we're going to be living into, I think, all three of these principles today. But first, want to really dive into that last bucket and learn a little bit about who is in the room here today. There's a ton of expertise. I get the opportunity to see on my end all the folks that are on this call. But we just launched this poll and would love for you to kind of self-identify. I know it's hard sometimes. People don't like being put in a bucket. But do your best because I think we want to get a chance to see what parts of our system are here and joining this conversation today. So go ahead, we're going to keep this open for maybe another 10 seconds. If you just hopped on, go ahead. There's a poll that was launched. Tell us about who is here today. All right, 5, 4. For the person who's waffling, can't figure out, just how are you showing up today? All right, let's go ahead. Close the poll and publish, right? So this is great. This is exactly what we love to see at 2 and 3, right? We have some educators, we have school leaders, we have district folks, parents. Nonprofit, our nonprofit ecosystem here in Chicago is really represented. Some funders, researchers, folks from higher education, reporters, right? We are just firm believers that everyone on this call, everyone in these buckets, obviously has stake in a role in some of the work that we're going to be talking about today. So we're really excited that you got an opportunity to join, and let's go ahead and dive in. So we got a kind of packed agenda. I'm going to be kicking things off, just trying to share a little bit of data framing and some goals for today that I think we're hoping can help inform our conversation. And then we get to kick it over to the real experts that are joining us. So first, we're going to be joined by 2 phenomenal leaders from Chicago Public School, Eugene Robinson and Brian Harris, to share a little bit of the work that is actively happening to help us better understand and make progress towards Black college success in CPS and in our city. And then we are turning it over to our other panel of experts. We have the opportunity to be joined by 3 CPS alumni who graciously agreed to share a little bit about their perspective as Black CPS students, Black college students, both now and as recent graduates. That we're really excited to gather some of their perspective that can kind of inform our conversation of how we continue to move forward in this work. We're hoping to save some time for Q&A that we will be doing using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. There should be a little kind of Q&A button. Please feel free over the course of this presentation to toss your questions in there. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as possible. We have time. And then we're hoping to also use that Q&A function at the end to talk a little bit about some of our opportunities to try to figure out a next step in this work. We'll come back to that. Okay, so I'm going to really briefly try to probably cram too much information to too little time, but I want to try to level set a little bit about why are we here today. As folks may or may not know, this is the third year that we've kind of carved out specific space to have a conversation about Black college success in Chicago public schools and in our city. This kind of comes off of the heels of another body of our work, which is tracking high school and college success for all of CPS that we've been doing for the last 11 years in partnership with our partners at the Carson Institute, the consortium on school research. This annual report that we write, the latest edition we just released in December. I know many of the folks that were on this call joined us for that release as well. But we really see it as an annual opportunity for us, and all of us in this system to both celebrate what we see is truly nation-leading work that is happening around making college access and success more possible for students in a large urban district like Chicago. But also it's an opportunity for us to be super clear about the work that still remains, right? And so we try to use this as an opportunity to really figure out how can we try to elevate what is some of the places where we need to continue to really be hyper-focused and make progress towards our goals. And so some of the ways to try to make this happen most clearly, if you've seen one of my presentations probably in the last 2 years, I've probably forced you to look at this graph, so bear with me. But this is one of my favorite graphs that I think helps us really kind of tell the story of college success in Chicago public schools quickly. And so just to orient us a little bit on this figure, at the bottom of each of these bars represents a high school graduating class from Chicago public schools. At the top of each bar is the number of CPS graduates from that class that immediately enrolled in college. And for the classes that we've had enough time to get the data back, the coloration helps us understand the number of CPS alumni that either obtained a bachelor's degree or associate's degree and certificate within 6 years, and also this number of students that did not obtain a bachelor's degree or associate's degree within 6 years. And so when I talk about this, there's a couple of things that it's a lot of information. There's a couple of things I always like to really point out, right? One, we look at the really dramatic rise that we've seen over the last 15 years in the number of CPS students that have been accessing college. We think it's really important to acknowledge this growth and recognize that this did not just happen, right? This is the result of a lot of concerted work that has happened across our city, leadership by the district and all the different partners that has really worked to make college something we were really focused on. And I know a lot of folks have been doing this work. It was something we were really focused on for about the last decade and a half. Since the pandemic, we've seen some fluctuations, but I think it's still really important to note something we point out in the report that even the latest year of data, the class of 2014, we had over 14,000 CPS high school graduates that immediately chose college as their post-secondary plan, 2/3 of all CPS graduates. So college really remains still the most popular post-secondary option for our students. And I think importantly, the other thing that we really try to acknowledge, right, and try to be really clear about in our report is that, two things are true here when we're talking about college completion. One, it's a true fact that we have more CPS alumni graduating from college with degrees than ever before at any point in history, right? That is something that is truly exciting, right? And again, is also a result of hard work, right? And it is also true that we have more CPS alumni that are attempting college and not finishing in that 6-year timeline than ever before as well, right? It's important to note that that doesn't mean that all these students' college journeys is over, but we also know that there's some of these stories, right? It's coming with that debt, that delay in helping students kind of figure out that next step, disappointment in their chosen pathway that we think is really important for us to wrestle with, and I think leads us to what we really like to talk about as kind of the leading edge of our work right now, right? It's kind of 2 core questions. One, continue to deeply understand who makes up this 14,000, right? Does everybody, is this a representation of all the different types of students and experiences that we serve in this city? But then also too, right? As we continue this work, how do we make sure that as we fill out these bars, we are laser focused on this idea of persistence and college completion, and we're having more of our students end up in this green and not that gray, right? To that first question that I posed, I think something that we believe is really important anytime that we're doing any type of analysis around outcomes, particularly anywhere, but I think particularly in a district as diverse as Chicago Public Schools, it's important for us to disaggregate the data, right? Separate and understand how does this story that has existed for the district as a whole apply to different student groups, right? And we do that pretty much in everything that we do in the report. You can take a look and do a deep dive into that. But what I really want to center today for our conversation, right? When we disaggregate this information for Black students in our district, right, we see a very different story. There's a couple things that I think I want to point out for our conversation today, right? One, when it comes to that increase in college enrollment, we've actually seen, particularly since the pandemic, a decline in the number of Black CPS graduates that are immediately choosing college, right? We'll get into some of the complexities of that in a minute. But again, as we saw kind of as the district story, we saw that dip in COVID, and we've kind of seen a little bit of this rebound that has not happened for our Black learners, right? I think is really important. And I think arguably as important, right, is when we talk about this idea of completion, we've also seen very little movement, right? And then increase in numbers of students, right? That rate of college completion has been remarkably steady. To dive into this point about college completion a little bit more, what I'm showing us here is taking a look at the demographic makeup for kind of our 4 largest racial categories of students for the class of college completers from the class of 2018, right over here, and comparing that to the makeup of the class of 2008, right, 10 years prior. And I think what we can see, right, is that again, we've seen remarkable increase in the number, right? Thousands more CPS alumni are graduating from college. It's something that we are incredibly excited about. This is important work to acknowledge and celebrate, right? And I think particularly this growth in Latino students that are receiving a degree is something that we should be all celebrating, right? This is also a population of students that historically has not been served well by higher ed. And at the same time, we also think it's critically important to recognize that that story is just very different for our Black learners, right? Which I think is something that we've talked a lot about. I know a lot of folks on this call have talked about, right? Is that again, despite everything that we've changed in this district, all the new systems, supports, programming, right? All good intentional work, right? It is important work, but we have to be really clear that not all students in our district have been able to benefit from the changes that we've been able to create. So I think it's important to acknowledge, right? Some of this is population, right? Some of this is population, right? Given that since 2010, we know that Chicago has lost over 85,000 Black residents, and I think as our friends over at Kids First have well documented that this population change has directly affected the number of Black students that are in our district, right? But I think what we are arguing in our report and today is that we we cannot accept that population change is we can't let that explain away the fact that Black students have not equitably participated, right, in kind of Chicago's larger college success story. And I think for the purposes of the conversation for today, I think it's also critically important for us to name that, both these outcomes, outcomes data that we were just looking at, and also this push out of Black residents in our city can't be separated from the lasting legacy of racial segregation that has existed in the city and the continued reality that just many of the challenges in our city related to things like housing, public safety, affordability, transportation, you name it, right, are currently affecting and continually affecting Black residents in uniquely detrimental ways, right, which we believe is having a direct effect on some of the data we've been looking at. Finally, just an important piece of context for this year's conversation is to acknowledge that also there's an active effort, being led by our current federal administration to both remove our ability to understand this problem, to dismantling of federal education and reshaped data systems, but also ongoing attacks, right, and intentional misarticulations of the goals around this work that I think are aimed at discrediting, and stopping our strategic response to this data, right? And what I would argue, I think, is our moral and legal responsibility as educators, as adults in this work, as Chicagoans, to ensure that all young people in our care truly have the resources and supports to build sustainable post-secondary plans and to successfully follow them. That is hanging over this conversation, and we'll touch on a bit, but I think it's important to name. So, in short, like, this is a lot. We can't pretend that it's not a heavy time to be doing this work. And I think if I can be, completely honest with everybody on this call, like, looking at this data every single day is one of the worst parts of my job, right? It can feel overwhelming. It does feel overwhelming at times. I think it's important to acknowledge that. And yet, as I was thinking about this session, I came across this book written by our friend and our colleague here at the university, Dr. Eve L. Ewing. She has a phenomenal new book called Original Sins that really dives into the history of education, specifically through the lens of Black students and Native American students in our country. And I think there was a really great quote that I think frames up for me the importance of this work and the importance of our discussion today. So if you bear with me, I'll read it quickly. When we throw up our hands and pronounce that we are doomed, we abdicate our responsibility to those who come after us, to those who will look to us as ancestors. Further, we disrespect the struggles of those who came before us, who fought and laughed and wrote and built things, not because they believed they would win every battle in their lifetimes, but because they saw it as essential for us. They went through a whole lot of trouble to draw maps towards our freedom, to forge tools for us. They did so while they were locked up, while they were starving, while they felt like they had hit the bottom on the well of their sorrows. Still, they were thinking of us. Who are we then to abandon these inheritances? It's important to acknowledge, there is nothing that any of us on this call can do about the data that we were just looking at, right? But I'm a firm believer that we can and we must own it. We got to learn from it. We have to use it to craft new values, new strategies, partnerships that continually get us closer to our goal of making college success a true choice for any CPS student who chooses that pathway. And I think what keeps me hopeful is a couple specific things, right? The reminder that, again, even in that data I showed you, right, Black student success is happening in this city every single day and on college campuses across this country. We have examples of that today. We're going to be talking about that today. And then also just the fact that, in Chicago, we've demonstrated a capacity to take on big challenges, right, in this district and in this city before, right? So, I think I see this challenge, this is the challenge that we've inherited, right? And I think this is, I'm hoping we can center our conversation around our opportunity to do something about it. So, thank you. I'm really excited to dive into our conversation. A couple of things. Again, it's going to be a lot of information, but we're really hoping that, as you are listening to our experts and we're talking through these panels, you can also start to think about what does this mean for you? What does this mean for you in your work? So there's 3 core kind of guiding questions that we're hoping folks can keep with them as we progress through our conversation today. One, getting a deep understanding of what is the current work, right? Some of the stuff that is already in progress that's happening to ensure our vision of college success includes Black learners. We get an opportunity to talk about that right now. Continuing to think about what do we need to continue to reimagine to ensure that resources and supports intended for all students are reaching Black learners in our city. And then again, what can we collectively do to support this work, right? So with that, I'm very excited to welcome two of my friends and colleagues in this work who I both learn a ton from, and I'm very, very, very appreciative of having them join us today. So just to do some quick intros, first I would like to introduce, also for both of them, I always want to call them doctor. I feel like y'all just have very doctor, you bring so much information, but we're not quite there yet, but one day maybe. But Eugene Robinson Jr. is inaugural Director of Black Student Success in the Office of Equity at Chicago Public Schools. With 20 years in education and social work, he's led initiatives impacting more than 100,000 students, from student engagement to post-secondary planning. His leadership at CPS and the University of Chicago Charter School has strengthened academic success, emotional supports for students and families. He's a proud graduate of Lynn Bloom High School. I'm going to throw in the swoop for him. Eugene's earned degrees from the Chicago State and the University of Chicago's Crown School of Social Work. He remains dedicated to racial justice, educational equity, and lifelong learning. I'm also really excited to welcome Brian Harris, who's the Director of Post-Secondary Pathways in the Office of School Counseling and Post-Secondary Advising within Chicago Public Schools. In this role, he drives district strategy for how adults advise young people choosing their path after high school, culminating in the support of over 23,000 students graduating with a concrete post-secondary plan every year. Prior to serving as Director of Post-Secondary Pathway, he served as Post-Secondary Operations Manager at Julian High School on the far south side of Chicago, and as the CPS Program Manager for the Chicago Gear Up grant. I'm very thankful to have known you both for many years. I'm very excited that you're here with us, so let's jump into it. Okay, start our conversation off. We're gonna get this out the way. We got a little bit elephant in the room, Eugene, so I'm gonna ask you to kick us off, and we know there's a lot of conversation around the Black Student Success Plan, but can you just share with us what is the current context around some of the challenges to the Black Student Success Plan and where we're at with that?
Thanks. Yeah. So excited to be here. Hopefully my computer doesn't freeze up. But yeah, we can address the elephant in the room. So we are celebrating 1 year. This month we launched the Black Student Success Plan in February of 2025. That was very intentional during the month of Black History. And upon launching that plan, a complaint was filed with the Office of Civil Rights within the U.S. Department of Education. That complaint moved into sort of an open investigation that our district has responded to. And our legal counsel team is I continuously collaborate with our law office, our law department related to the inquiry. And right now, we have responded, and we have not necessarily heard back anything related. So there's nothing pending related to stopping the work that we are doing related to the plan at this moment. And so, but we ground ourselves in several things as to why we continue to do this work. One, this work is codified by state law. So the state statute, the Illinois code that created the newly elected school board, for many may not know this, it requires that board to establish a Black Student Achievement Committee that will serve as the accountability and governance for the district as it relates to the implementation of this plan. And so that committee has recently opened an application. It's chaired by Board Member Blaze and Board Member Brown. And they opened a committee, an application, and they received a lot of applicants related to joining that committee, and it recently closed I believe February 9th. So it opened, closed, and then sort of reopened. It work is also grounded in our strategic plan. And there are five priorities in that plan, and two of them are on this Zoom with post-secondary and Black student success. And then when we think about our equity framework around targeting universalism. So I like to say that the Black Student Success Plan is the district's targeting universalism plan to support a group of students that we've identified. You've shared some data that we've identified with current historical data that is furthest from access to success and opportunity. And so that is what we are grounding ourselves in. That is the reason why we are continuing to move forward with this work. And we'll continue to respond to any inquiry related to the Office of Civil Rights at the U.S. Department of Education.
I appreciate that. I'm glad we are keeping it moving, and so we will
Yeah.
do the same. So, thank you for those updates on the plan, Brian. I do want to kick it over to you before we jump into kind of tactics. Um, I would love to just kind of like take a step back a little bit, right? I think for a lot of us on this call, I think we acknowledge there's a lot of fields around higher education in general, right? I've heard people talk about like the vibes of recession, right? It's kind of just like a general, sometimes down feeling on higher education and the importance of degrees, and I think some of that's fair, right? But I think from your perspective, you are charged with helping students navigate a variety of post-secondary pathways, right? So all great work, but I'm curious just from your perspective, like, why do you still think a college degree still matters right now, and particularly as it relates to this conversation about Black CPS students?
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me on. This is a timely question because tomorrow I get to be on a panel with y'all siblings over at the consortium, discussing data that shows the likelihood that various demographics of students have a good job, right? Roughly defined as a job with higher income, based off their education level, right? And unsurprisingly, Black boys and Black girls are the most impacted by the level of educational attainment, meaning that Black women in particular, actually, who have no sort of post secondary education, are who are coming from low income backgrounds are likely to continue to be low income, as opposed to if they earn a degree, there's a substantial increase in the chances that they will be economically mobile, right? And so I think this is true for a number of reasons, right? So certainly we know that we're in a time where the skills that you bring to the table are as important as ever in the job market. We no longer have pipelines from high school to well-paying jobs that don't require any post-secondary education, and this is something that impacts all students. But what exacerbates the issue for Black students in particular, I think, is the acute impact of segregation. Chicago is a massive city with an incredible amount of resources, but those resources are very much concentrated in certain areas. And Black students, Black people in general, have less access to those areas than all other groups of people. So we know that the skills, expertise, and resources that come from someone coming out of, let's say, Lincoln Park, are not making their way to Austin, Roseland, South Shore, what have you, right? And so you need a college degree to be a doctor, a lawyer, a teacher, an engineer. You need a credential or a degree to be an electrician, a plumber, a welder, right? And if we don't help our young people get those degrees or credentials, then our communities are going to be starved of the expertise that they need to sustain themselves. So not just, I think we want to move out of just, it's not just the young people won't be able to sustain themselves, but the communities the young people come from won't be able to sustain themselves. So I think a degree is important now as it's ever been.
Appreciate that. Thank you. And I think on that note, would love to kind of dive in a little bit from your perspective, Brian, and I think Eugene, feel free to chime in as well. But how have you been thinking about addressing some of those unique needs and some of those unique challenges that I think exist in the city of Chicago? And we're talking about resources that are available to our students and the effect that's having on Black student access and success.
I know Brian, I mean, both Brian and I could probably share a little bit, but I think it's grounding ourselves in, if I just elevate the plan itself, right? When we think about what Brian just sort of stated, how do we collectively work across various offices and departments, and how do we work across schools, and how do we activate the ecosystem? So I'll just acknowledge that within the plan is a call to action. And so we have to activate the ecosystem because what Brian shared, there is aspects of community impact on what educational attainment or lack thereof will do to a community. There's also economics, right? You talked about affordability of housing and being able to have a livable wage. And so we have to begin to activate the ecosystem to create that sort of energy and synergy around the Black Student Success Plan, from philanthropic community to businesses to higher ed institutions, right? And some of that work is already living and breathing and happening. And, Brian and I can share a little bit later. And I know he'll probably touch up upon those particular things. Partnerships are really important related to being able to get young people these credentials. We have to serve, let me just say, we have to serve as the social capital for Black students. We have to open up gates. When we think about what unions and trades and what certain affluent communities and school districts are able to do, or I attend a certain institution, right? Along with that education, there's some social capital that allows. And we know, yes, it takes the training to have, and all of our young people are equally as talented, and they earn the credentials. They do the work, right? I often say, do not talk to me about a young person's work ethic, because many of the students have the work ethic because they're able to show up to school every single day and graduate and enroll in college. So they have it. Many of what we have to serve as an institution, and even as this plan, is the social capital. We have to kick open doors, remove what the locks that are on the doors for our young people to be able to access these opportunities. So it's much more than a credential. So when I say activate the ecosystem, I mean activate the ecosystem. We will get, and Brian's team and the specialists in the schools that are doing this work, they will get the young people there where they need to be, right? And it is a long road ahead of us, but we have to kick some doors down. We have to break down some social barriers when it comes to accessing opportunities, and we have to serve as that social capital for young people.
And Brian, like I know you like this data is not new to you, right? You've been thinking about Black student success for forever in your career, right? And so, can you talk a little bit about like what are some of those things that that you all have been working to put in place to support this work?
Yeah, I mean the work is constant, so I could go on for hours around like the ways that we think about tackling the work, but I'll kind of focus on some a few standout things, right? But to preface, like outcomes are a product of conditions, right? And so when we see patterns in outcomes for specific groups of students, then we have to ask ourselves, what are the conditions unique to that student population? So I think overarching, like we have to approach the problem with that philosophy, right? So when we talk about Black students in particular, we know that they're much more likely than their peers. And this is just, speaking to Black students, we know in historical data, they want to go away for college, right? And away typically means more costs. So it becomes particularly important to help students find affordable options and support things like scholarship completion. So our scholarship team has set goals this year to increase the number of scholarship dollars earned by Black male students in particular, who we know have historically earned fewer scholarship dollars. So that's one example of like, hey, this is something that this specific student or a specific type of student facing, and how we're going to specifically address it, right? Another example would be, we know Black students are disproportionately concentrated in smaller schools, and have limited course offerings, and this is going to impact college persistence because they're not going to have access to the rigorous coursework that we know is correlative with staying academically on track. College comes with SAP holds, comes with literally just like not being able to continue, right? So our sister department and the early college department are doing a lot of great work around helping schools organize themselves academically to maximize the number of students who've been able to access early college. coursework. And over the past few years, we've seen how that has impacted persistence, but particularly in places where students didn't necessarily have built-in access within their schools um, to those coursework. And then I'd be remiss as the child of two HBCU grads. I'd be remiss not to highlight the data that we're looking at that shows that Black students who attend HBCUs persist in college at rates not just like a couple points higher, 20 points higher, nearly 20 points higher than peers who don't attend HBCUs, right? And so we often hear from Black students about their K-12 experience, how important sense of belonging is. So why wouldn't that also translate to their post-secondary experiences, right? And so we've been working behind the scenes in partnership with a number of HBCUs to help address the obstacles to enrollment for Black students who are interested in HBCU. So yeah, those are just a few examples, but I think it's important to just like understand context and talk to Black students, engage with Black students to know what is happening with them specifically.
Incredibly helpful. For both of you, right? I think we've been able to kind of talk about the plans, talk about some of these strategies, but again, I think we can acknowledge none of this work happens, particularly from your perspective, without partnership with schools, counselors, school leaders, right? Partners, right? And so would love for you to just, as this work has progressed, are there stories of schools that you're really excited about, what you're seeing as promising practices that are happening in buildings when it comes to building equitable college access and success strategies?
I would I know Brian will talk about that, but I'll just talk about something Brian highlighted. We talked about sense of belonging and connected. So some powerful things that we are seeing is related to, so even internally, we have something where we're convening the various offices, departments, and Brian is a part of that, specifically around the goals and the plan, right? And that collaboration also includes teaching and learning, student voice. It includes talent when we think about who is least seen in our school system, Black male teachers, right? And so when we think about connectedness and sense of belonging, Brian is absolutely right, right? We see that in our data. And some promising things is around the conversations that we are having in networks with school leaders around connecting, looking at their sort of equity-centered leadership moves and making connections to the Black Student Success Plan to have the goals connected to their CIWP. So schools are getting ready to write their next wave of CIWP, right? So when Brian talked about the conditions, what are the conditions? What are the data? Who's furthest, right? Is it Black boys at IEPs that we need to move to get to that post-secondary sort of outcome? So we're seeing synergy and energy around those particular things. I also elevate sense of belonging and connectedness. So we are working internally. We've been doing some focus groups and conversation with schools around Black student unions, right? That is unique to, we often hear them in higher ed, but there are some elementary schools and high schools that have Black student unions where young people are organized around this sort of identity and affinity and cultural affirmation groups to be able to support their connectedness and their sense of belonging. So giving a shout out to schools like Roosevelt, right? Roosevelt High School that has a Black student union, Mama Mata Lindblom that has a Black student union, right? And then having a conversation with schools like Ogden Elementary with those group of students. We did a focus group, just a powerful conversation just around identity and culture and voice, which is critically important and as an avenue to be able to support young people. So there's all types of sort of connections that central office and departments are making to the Black Student Success Plan. And then there's all in schools as well, being able to create those conditions that Brian sort of talked about. And so Black student unions is something that is new. Even Washington High School is giving a shout out to those young people that are doing some amazing work over there. And so I'll just pass it to Brian to really talk about the Elevate, because what I've been seeing when we go out to school, some of that post-secondary work.
Yeah, be remiss to we got to bring it back to Lindblom again, right? Shout out Principal Banks and team. We might, if any of y'all swoopers are in the call. We might see some swoops in the comments, but
Mhm.
I want to contextualize just from an outcome perspective what's happening at Lindblom, not only from their sense of belonging work, but from other aspects of their post secondary strategy. Like Lindblom, this school in West Inglewood that is still nearly 2/3 low income students has a higher college enrollment rate in 2004 than Peyton Jones in Whitney Young, right? And as they've increased their enrollment, there's been no drop off in persistence, right? So they're essentially performing as if they were a school full of entirely wealthy students. So those students are going and on the path to graduation. And there's a number of reasons why they're successful, but I'll point out that like no school by a wide margin sends a higher percentage of their students to HBCUs than Lindblom, right? And so connecting to like why we are seeing those strategies that I mentioned in the previous segment work, like we're seeing it work at the school level, a school with a concrete HBCU or driving advising strategy, it is informing their outcomes, right? Um, Another school I'd highlight is Morgan Park. And this is where partnerships come into play, right? Morgan Park, a Hope Chicago school. Um, in Hope Chicago, we know covers cost of attendance for students who are enrolling at partner institutions, right? They just released a report, and we're seeing the same thing. Like between 85 and 90% of the students enrolling in this year, like the persistence gains are absolutely incredible, right? Um, and again, this is like it's unprecedented for an initiative to have that significant of an impact on a high school. In now those are mid and large size high schools, but we're seeing success at other types of schools as well, right? Shout out to our Surge fam, Jakendra Williams over at Williams.
Mhm.
Y'all, every single class of 2025 student at Williams Med Prep High School, every single one is enrolled in college right now. 100% college enrollment rate. Um, and so, like, there we see again that sense of belonging, small school, but an incredible counselor who just provides individualized help to our young people. So, I think the issue is not that we're not seeing success in places, right? The challenge is how do we scale those things, right? How do we scale the type of HBCU advising culture that we're seeing at Lindblom? How do we find other philanthropic partners that allow us to eliminate those financial barriers like that we see at Morgan Park, and how do we replicate that personalized advising that we see at Williams? But we see the examples that promote success already.
Love that. Thank you for elevating both those. We are coming up I could you all very much know this. I could talk to you all day about this. We often do. But we want to pass it over to our next panel. Before we close out, again, you all saw we have a ton of perspective, a ton of expertise, a ton of people who are actively engaged in this work as well, right? On this call today. And I would love just from both of your perspectives to think about this wider community and even specifically people that are on the call today, right? What is something that you need? What is one thing that you need from everyone on this call to help support you in the work that you're leading in the district?
I would say get active. Um, I would like for everyone on this call to find where they see themselves in connection to the Black Student Success Plan and to not wait around, and to reach out and figure out to sort of connect and figure out what the partnership, right? Because it's going to take all of us collectively to be able to do that. Join us for our community roundtables that are coming up in March, right? That'll give you an opportunity to get a sneak peek into some of the work that different offices are doing, like Brian's work. We really want people to see themselves connected to this work, and find that connection point and jump in to be able to do this and also hold us accountable, right? This is a shared accountability. We want you to hold us accountable, and we want to be transparent about the work that is that's happening across the district.
Love it. Brian, what's one thing?
Yeah, mine would be along the same vein. Like Office of School Counseling and Post-Secondary Advising, OSCAPA. Like my department's reach is we support staff at district government schools, but and so I can tell you what's working, what's not working here, right? But students are served by, charters, they're served by CBOs, they're served by churches, mothers,
Mhm.
fathers, unks, right? Like neighbors, right? If you are doing something to support Black students and it's working, let everybody know.
Yes.
If you are loving and supporting Black students and you're struggling to help them meet their aspirations, let everybody know. We got to keep open lines of communication so that we can supplement each other's work.
Yeah.
It's kind of cliche, but like, put all the egos aside, put all the false sense of competition aside, right? And let's figure out how to pool so the best ideas kind of come to the top for everybody.
Absolutely love that. Thank
Yeah,
you.
Dom, I really also wanted to underscore that there's still work that we have to do around practices and mindsets and beliefs, right? There is still things that we continue to still have to do that work around beliefs and mindsets and practices. So I don't want to leave that piece out. And so there's mirror work that as adults who control the system, young people are showing up and they're saying to us what they want to do. We have to continue to do the work as adults around the systems, the policies, the practices, the mindsets, and beliefs.
That's everybody's work. I appreciate that. Um, if we were actually in person, this is the part where we would have rapturous applause because everybody would be so appreciative of the wisdom you all just dropped. Thank you. Stick around. We're going to come back for Q&A, but at this time, I would also like to transition over to our next panel. And we have some phenomenal CPS alumni who've joined us. But I get the pleasure of introducing my colleague in at To and Through, who is going to be leading this panel. Naomi Wilford is going to be joining us and helping us continue the conversation. So, Naomi, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you so much, Dom. I really, really appreciate that. Good afternoon, everyone. As Dom shared, my name is Naomi Wilford, and I serve as one of the managers of coaching and improvement for the Middle Grades Network here at the To and Through Project. As a former CPS teacher, I am so extremely proud and excited to serve as the moderator for today's CPS alumni panel. As educators, we all want the very best for our students, limitless possibilities that extend far beyond the walls of our classrooms and schools. Yet sometimes as adults, we don't fully see or hear what is actually needed, what young people are expressing, and at times what they practically are screaming for us to understand. Too often we mistake our experience for their experience. So today we want to shift that a little bit. We want to hear from them, their story, their truth, and their perspective. We recognize that their experience is not a monolith. It does not represent every Black student in CPS. However, it is a start. So we're going to go ahead and get started. But before we dive in, I want to introduce our incredible CPS alumni panelists, starting with Suleiman Rahameto. He is a sociology graduate, student, and coordinator for curriculum and internationalization at DePaul University. He is born and raised in Chicago's Uptown and Roger Park neighborhood. He is a product of Chicago Public Schools and CPS charter schools. His academic and professional interests center on education, inequality, and data analysis to support community-driven research and equitable policy. He is also a die-hard Bulls fan. Welcome, Suleiman. Our next panelist is going to be Ashante Baker. She is a sophomore at Illinois State University, where she is majoring in applied health science and nursing. She is a proud Hope Scholar and a graduate of Morgan Park High School. Ashante has distinguished herself both as a scholar and a leader. She served as the captain of the Morgan Park cheerleading team, and despite the rigorous demands of the the IB program and extracurricular schedule, she graduated with honors. At ISU, Ashante continues to lead with purpose. She is the founder and president of Project Legacy, a student organization at ISU dedicated to fostering meaningful connections among students while promoting mental health awareness, social well-being, and personal growth. Through her leadership, Ashante is creating spaces that empower her peers to thrive academically, emotionally, and socially. Welcome, Ashante. We're so happy to have you here. Our last panelist is Caitlin Savato. She is a first year at the University of Southern California, studying political science and sociology. She is a 2025 graduate and alumni of Percy L. Julian High School. Caitlin is a community organizer and poet who spent her teenage years advocating and organizing for city policies and initiatives for Black students. Welcome, Caitlin. So we're going to go ahead and get started. So excited. So Suleiman, we're going to start with you. What is your reaction to knowing that CPS has made progress as a system, but those outcomes have not been experienced in the same ways for Black students?
Well, I think it's pretty sad because growing up I have noticed transactions like that, like transitions like that. And to see that because I graduated elementary school in 2014,
Mhm.
and now that we're in 2026 and kind of seeing the same kind of trajectories is kind of it's kind of a bummer. But from what I remembered, connecting it to now, I definitely noticed it growing up. And so I went to Walt Disney Magnet School in Uptown, very racially diverse and socioeconomically diverse um, public school. But many of the students were from Uptown Rogers Park, like the neighborhoods I grew up in. Um, but I really understood and realized in my eighth grade year that a lot of different students had different expectations,
Mm.
especially if you were in the gifted program. So at Disney, we had a gifted program for each grade. Um, and in these gifted programs, much of the students were non-minority students.
Mhm.
Even though, yes, the school was very diverse, um, but it always seemed like in each gifted program, there were a little bit more non-minorities, such as Caucasian students.
Mhm.
And everyone knew that they would always be going to selective Roman schools. Everyone knew that, even though we had teachers to give like big group talks about saying, oh, even though if you might be in this program or not, you not might not likely be going to like a selective Roman school. However, we all knew that wasn't the case. So it's easier for them. For an example, there was a documentary from WTGW back in 2014 that followed five students from across the city to just track their time applying to select Roman schools. And there was one student that they picked from Disney, but they didn't really represent the whole student population, and in their experience was not equivalent to the whole school's demographic or experience. Um, Even though going back into the documentary recently, the gifted program did seem more diverse than I remembered, but there were still like a little overwhelmingly more less non-minority students. Um, and then my cousin who graduated from there in 2024, 10 years later, when I'd seen the graduate class go up on the stage to walk, I see it was mainly more Caucasian students, other than all the other classes. So yeah, it was, and then also I think one of the main things was that the gifted class did get to learn Chinese or Mandarin, while other classes did not get to. However, that did change years later, as my cousin had told me that now all students in every class other than gifted would be learning Mandarin. So
So
yeah.
really thinking about, how did this really start, within your eighth grade year or, your elementary experience, and how might that continue to impact sense of belonging and, how that might even approach how you're applying to colleges as you continue your educational journey. We're going to loop back to that in just a little bit, but I really want to kind of bring Caitlin into the conversation. Thank you so much, Suleiman, for sharing your perspective, because that is very real of, how that might impact how you're approaching things. So Caitlin, Suleiman kind of talked about this almost idea of sense of belonging across his eighth grade year. And I know you talk a lot about that with your experience with Julian. So I'd really love to kind of invite you into the conversation about your experience applying to college. Who were your champions? What specific supports did you have? And then hopefully we can hear a little bit about, that you're at USC. Why did you choose to leave Chicago? So I'd love to hear from your perspective.
Yes, of course. And thank you for having me here again. Um, as we talked about, Julian for me was so many things that I think media and kind of the narrative of our world tells us is wrong for Black students. Julian was so family centered and community centered, at least in my experience. And it was one of the first, and I want to say last times now, that I've actually felt like I had somewhere that I could call home. Um, and where people reflected, I guess, yes, the means of like my community, but where it was honesty and transparency that kind of ruled us all. It was the honesty of all of our experiences. It was the fact that none of us were experiencing anything linear. None of us were experiencing the same symptoms of a system. And so I think, of course, when it comes to my college application process and kind of just how, like, attending USC, I've been grateful and gracious and blessed to be put in circumstances that have allowed me to have the tools and resources that I need. But I think it's the aspect and the dynamic that not all Black experiences are linear, right? And it's the fact that we can take individual experiences and stories that are really, really good and mean a lot to our community and reflect the empowering and the beneficiary parts of our community and the way that what we put into our young people. But I think the young people who are often in the shadows, the young people who are not at the table are often the most important people. And it's the schools like Julian, like Finger, like Morgan Park, like Corliss, who are filled with young people who have so much potential, so much connection to culture, so much connection to community, that often has like that disconnect. Sorry if I went on too long about that, but I think that played a huge part into my college application process. It allowed me to see where is it that my peers are kind of leaning into. It allowed me to see where is it that my kind of community organizing work and just like individual self is calling me to. It allowed me to reflect in that way. And like I said, it was the culture of Julian. It was that home base that kind of reminded me of all of the liberatory practices that we kind of need now, right? It's important to highlight that Chicago right now is kind of like the catalyst of power and resistance in this country. Talking about Black student success is resistance, right? But I think applying it, making sure that it's a process, making sure that it's applicable to all Black students, is even more important. And so that's kind of what played into my college decision process and just my mindset overall while attending at Julian.
Thank you so much. And we're going to come back to, how this can be something for all Black students and, how we can meet the needs of so many beautiful young folks across the city. Thank you so much, Caitlin. That was such a beautiful response. Ashante, you had a similar experience at Morgan Park. We talked about that was such a great place of a sense of community for you. And that was so great to be able to hear your experience there. But I want to shift the conversation a little bit. You are a sophomore now and ran into a few challenges your freshman year. We'd love to hear a few of those if you feel comfortable sharing. And if so, we'd love to also hear what supports or resources do you think would have helped you during your freshman year? You came from a strong community that looked really different for you your freshman year of college. Love to hear your experience.
Okay, so for my freshman year, first of all, hey everybody. But for my freshman year, at first I walked in thinking everything was going to be perfect because of the cliche and like original feedback that I got from previous college students saying that college is like something that everybody should experience and like cliche things like that will make me feel like, oh, college is an easy breeze. So when I walked in, I'm thinking all rainbows and hearts. So I walked in with that expectation, but I did fall into some challenges with learning how to negotiate like roommates and socializing and things like that, as well as applying my anxiety to a bigger campus than what Morgan Park was. It was like a smaller family. Now this is a bigger community and things like that. So it was a tough transition working on that. But some of the challenges that I did experience was, like I said, the roommates and just learning how to advocate for myself and learn how to deal with professors, because I've also learned that professors are not taught to teach they are just taught to spread information. So with that being said, I did have to learn how to study correctly and ask for help without being scared to ask for help and things like that. And I feel like that's what a lot of college students struggle with, because they don't want to feel beneath themselves, and they don't want to feel like they have fallen back compared to everybody else. So asking for help is a real struggle when it comes to college, as well as learning how to study can be a very big downfall when going to college, because if you don't know how to study and if you don't know how to ask for help, it will play a big part in challenges, which happened for me on top of the roommate situation. But to answer your question, one thing that I feel like that I should have had was more check-ins. With my Hope Scholarship, I did have a lot of support, but when it came to rooming situations and things like that, I felt like I should have been more supported, even though with that being said, they did try their best. But it was a lot of things missing, as well as they did apply a lot of things, but most of the things that they did help me with was unnecessary. I felt like they should have helped me with more things that was way more important than what they were actually helping me with.
Got it. So I know that you kind of shared, some things that were social issues, and that line you said about, feeling as if it's spreading information versus, being taught is so real, right? And it's just a different experience than your high school experience. I know some of that has kind of led you to Project Legacy. Would you like to talk a little bit about that, of ways that you're able to kind of, support others that might be feeling a little bit in a challenging, spot?
Okay, with Project Legacy, I honestly created it because my freshman year was not like everybody else's freshman year, from what I have gathered from the people that I have met at ISU. So creating Project Legacy was kind of like a sensation of creating a second family, just like how I had at Morgan Park. Just applying it to a bigger community and a bigger space where it's more diverse people, more people with different majors. Like for instance, most of the people that's on my e-board position, there are healthcare majors, veterinarians, and things like that. So when people come to us and ask us about our major and what helped us get into the major and why we chose the major, it really lightens up my day, because a lot of them come from being freshmen and not knowing what they want to do with their life, and they are undeclared. And as you know, you can't be undeclared for a certain period of time. So them coming to me and asking me for help and things, and asking me about nursing, it really does brighten up my day, because nursing, like, I love nursing. I love everything that is attached to it and things like that. So just helping them get their feet planted on the ground correctly without stumbling, and just helping them find new activities to do, not just cuddled up in their room, because that does play a big part. I feel like when it comes to college, you do need to get out more and you do need to socialize, because being alone in your room does take a toll on a person, especially when they're experiencing classes as well. So being able to just make them my second family besides the family that we do have at home is a big thing, as well as just letting them know that we are their support system, whether or not they have good support system at home or with Hope Chicago, as well as not a lot of people are not in Hope Chicago, so they don't have the support that I do have. So even though I am very grateful of my support, everybody does not have that. So Project Legacy is kind of like my Hope Chicago 2.0. It's just to help around and just make everybody feel welcome, because I don't want what happened my freshman year to happen to anybody else.
Thank you so much, Ashante, for being so vulnerable and sharing all sides of your experience. Building off of that, Suleiman, you graduated from CPS in 2018 and St. Olaf in 2022. Can you share some of your experiences, like getting to college? That was, a little bit ago now, getting through college, and now life as a college graduate. I know you talked about things that you wish you would have learned, even before getting to college, then possibly through it, and then perhaps after as well.
Yeah, so I went to CPS charter school. I went to a Noble school, the Noble Academy, in like the Cabrini Green area. And Noble was all about getting us to college with test prep, um, just overall, as long as you get that acceptance, you're good. Um, but throughout my time, especially at St. Olaf, I wish that we learned more about different majors and this type of skills that we would need to be successful in these majors. Because it was all about financial aid, getting the great ACT, SAT scores, and that acceptance. So, because when I got into St. Olaf, which also really wasn't my choice, St. Olaf had a lot of different majors, liberal arts, and I just assumed, okay, I guess computer science. I come from an immigrant family from Ethiopia, and computer science is like that buzzword, that buzz skill or job to have. But I dropped it in 2 weeks because the course really wasn't for me, and I was really nervous. Luckily, I found data science my sophomore year, but I was really lucky. So. Noble really didn't help us like ways to stay in college. A lot of my friends went to college. We all went to Noble, obviously, but a lot of them dropped out after their freshman year, or even not even going into winter semester or winter quarter their freshman year. Or many of them went back but didn't get to graduate on time. Took 6 years, which is not bad. It's not a bad thing, but as I remember Noble always saying like 4 years, 4 years, 4 years, but in actuality, a lot of students don't take 4 years to graduate, which is okay. Um, I think, yeah, getting through college, just the overall understanding majors and coursework, I really wish that in high school that we really looked into those certain things. Overall, what the classes we were like getting in there. I know a lot of students come in undecided, but to have more, especially more Black students to understand like what we would like to do, like what at least a strong foundation entering those doors would be very beneficial. Um, and again, like a lot of these schools in the US are a PWI. St. Olaf is a very much a PWI school. And I know the Noble Network within CPS is 98% people of color. And then having alumni from schools coming back to the school that you're attending, the high school you're attending, to talking about being in a PWI as a person of color, as a Black student, would have been very beneficial, and not just the typical, okay, these are financial aids, okay, getting a 36 on the ACT, getting at least three acceptances, like it's more than that. Yeah, so.
Thank you for sharing, Suli. And I know you shared this a couple times, and you shared with me that like St. Olaf wasn't your first choice. So why leave Chicago? You know, you have a pretty tight-knit community here. What was the reason you chose to go out of state?
I actually didn't really want to go out of state. I wanted to go to Urbana, and I did get into Urbana, but my advisors, meaning two of my advisors, thought that I deserved more, which I see how it can be a positive thing, but I definitely wish I took more control of the decision. Because I wanted to go to Banner because like I wanted to leave the city. Actually, I didn't want to leave the city, but I had a lot of people pushing me. So I was very that content type of person. Like I'm cool with anything, but a lot of my advisors were saying like St. Olaf is your match school. I think it would be a better environment for you. You should leave the city. It'll be a better environment for you. And I understood what they were coming from, but I do feel like I would have better experiences at Urbana, and also Urbana. I would scholar at Urbana, even though St. Olaf is a private school and they gave me a lot of money. I feel like if I just compare and contrast, my thought process is a little bit better. I feel like Urbana would have been a little bit better option for me, but even though like I'm glad I went to St. Olaf, but I just wish I had more autonomy in my think. Like I didn't really have that much confidence in high school as well,
Mm,
especially in decision making, and I just let teachers do everything for me. Um, Knowing that I should have more autonomy because this is my future. Like that decision can really depict what your life will look like in the next 4 years, 4 to 10 years. So yeah,
that's very
overall,
real.
yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. That's a lot of great insight for, I think, folks in the space. And thinking about different ways to support, like I heard you say, you wish you had more autonomy and, maybe a bigger picture on what possible options were. So, Caitlin, I'm going to kick on over to you. Eugene was talking about the Black Student Success Plan and, really wanting to make a priority of supporting Black students throughout their educational journeys, right? He shared that he wanted to activate the ecosystem and really try to understand that this is like a whole wide effort. You shared that you were, in high school when this was starting to form, or conversations were started to have. So, with that said, now that it's been a year, how could CPS be held accountable to ensure that this plan is working?
Um, yes. So I think that for me, what I guess the thing that I've been most grateful for about the school district over the last year is it's kind of shifting its honesty and transparency about where we are as a city. And I think, like I said earlier, I think that's really important, because Chicago is kind of catapulting the nation's resistance work. And the ways that we are of course being censored. The ways that we are, of course, are not being publicized the way that they need to be. But I think for me, there's two things, of course, with the district, and then I think with the city itself. I think as far as holding accountable, we always have to return back to our communities, and that means returning back to our families. And I think it's most important right now for the district to be honest and open about how Black families have been sold out, how Black families have been mistreated, how families have been overserved and underworked. And I think that if the district does not take initiative to grow some kind of connection, some kind of system of understanding with families, and making sure that we are in consistent communication with families. I think that's the first step. It's the first step to rebuilding the culture in our city, where for so long, I think adults have viewed young people as our own entities, as if we don't have parents, as if we don't have caregivers. And for so long, the media and publicly, that has been played. And it's honestly disgusting. It's disgusting the way that Black children are depicted. It's disgusting the way that Black children are given so much independence and agency, and then told that we can't make the right choices, being told that we don't show up the right ways, being told that we don't indulge or engage in the right ways. And so that's very frustrating. And I think for me, the best thing that I could have ever had was that kind of line of communication between family and school. And I think, of course, for me, with my experience, and I think very similar to Ashante, like, school kind of became family. And for me now at USC, like, of course, I could code switch and I could do this and I could do that, but like, I don't oftentimes feel at home, and I don't see my people. I don't feel my people. And it's been probably one of the most, like, not lonely, but alone moments that I've had, because I know what community feels like to me now. I know what it means when adults who look like me and understand me are in connection and relationship to me. And so being at a place that not only feels so alienating, but it feels almost like counterintuitive to an extent. And I think that's the other part about it, as far as just our city as a whole, kind of doing the work of, yes, taking care of our children, but taking care of our culture, kind of taking off this veil of being on guard, and I'm not sure who said it earlier, but being ready to share ideas, being ready to not do some kind of work, but I think that it's time to be honest about where our country is, and how everything that we're experiencing is so unlikely and so unprecedented. And I think as long as the rest of the country continues to move and operate in ways as if everything is normal, we will not move anywhere. And I think that's the work that Chicago and that our district, that the school district is doing, I believe, that requires some kind of collection of wrongdoing. And I think that that's what the Black Student Success Plan offers. I just think, of course, now this is the work. This is the work of making sure that Black students are being cared for, are being looked out for. This is the work of making sure that Black students have spaces to say, I don't know what I'm going through right now, or I don't know what this is, or like, in college, and not only college, but going away for college, for me, has revealed so much of that. It's a layer of, like, yes, I did leave Chicago, but not only did I leave Chicago, but I was exposed to this whole other world. And I think going to USC and being in LA in particular has shown me the very unique and intimate ways of Chicago that makes us so strong. It is our humanity. It is our care for one another. It's the fact that, there could be contention, and there could be tension between this entity and this entity and that, but it's the care. And I think LA and college has made me see that there's such a removal of care, and there's such an added layer of capitalism. There's such an added layer of systems of oppression. There's such an added layer of isolation. And then there's the layer of, I think for me, now being in higher ed, I mean, at Julian, I was reading Black poets, I was reading Bell Hooks, I was reading Toni Morrison, and now I'm kind of being given material that's like, well, here's how we oppressed your people, and here's the philosophy of how we oppressed your people, and here's all of the ways that we're going to keep you in this cage, and here's all the ways that you can't be free, and here's all the books that you need to read it, right? And I'm at a point right now where it's like, okay, so who's my home? Where do I return to? And what can I read? What can I engage in? Who can I call on when I'm so sorry, like I can't do the white man's paperwork. Like I can't get lost in that. Like where can I go and what adults and what community kind of calls me back home? And yeah.
Thank you so much, Caitlin. Just a word, honestly, so beautiful. I'm really ruminating on taking care of our children and taking care of our culture, which is such a real thing. We're going to kind of close us out with each of you, and I'm going to start with you, Ashante, then go to you, Suleiman, and then Caitlin. This is like rapid fire because I know Dom's probably like, Naomi, you're at time. But we also want to leave with, one last hope of what is your hope and dream for Black graduates in CPS. If you could just say that to the whole room, we'd love to hear that from you. Ashante, start us out.
Okay, so my hopes and dreams for everybody is to stay true to themselves and make sure they're doing what they want to do and not what people expect them to do, because that does play a big part on mental, just like everybody in this call has agreed on, as well as I hope everybody ends up successful, and make sure that you work hard to play hard and make sure that it all comes out great in the end.
Thank you, Ashante. Suleiman?
Well, I hope CPS gives Black graduates more exposure to how we can succeed in society that we live in, whether exposure to different languages, cultures, careers, etc., while also trusting us to lead in decision making, because those choices will shape our futures, and overall allowing Black students and graduates to use their voice and gain confidence.
All right. And Caitlin, round us out.
I think my hopes and dreams is for all of us to be free, to be educated and empowered, and to complete the work and to complete the callings and the brilliance of our ancestors.
Oh, I'm holding back tears right now, but it's quite all right. That was so beautiful. You all are such brilliant humans. I really do appreciate you all taking your time, your space to share your amazing story. So thank you very much. Dom, I believe I am putting it back to you.
I want to echo that. Thank you all. And actually, we'll invite all of our panelists to jump back. We're going to transition our Q&A, but thank you, Ashante, Caitlin, and Suli for just transparency and sharing your perspective. I think it's incredibly important for today. So thank you. As a reminder, we have a couple of minutes for questions. If folks want to put those questions for any of our panelists into that box, would love to start working through some of those. But just to kick us off and open this up to anyone who wants to respond. As you know, we've talked a lot. Feel free, Brian and Eugene, feel free to come on back. We've talked a lot about this idea of trying something different, right? And trying different approaches, supporting Black students. And so I'm curious, like, what is that dreaming that folks are thinking about? What is something that you would like to see us potentially as a system try to approach differently to improve Black college success?
First of all, I just want to tell this panel that y'all rocked it, and I have plans on following up with one. I can get one of the panelists I can get in contact easily, but I will follow up with every last one of you guys because you you said everything. I can't. There's nothing else left to say. But what I will say is that what Caitlin and Salami and Ashante elevated is we definitely have to. This is our opportunity to how do we reimagine that high school experience, not only for Black students, but for all students, right? What does that experience look like in 2026, 2027 that is different than what I experienced, what you experienced down with Brian, or even before the pandemic with a lot of students. And I think they both have elevated our need to think outside the box, to be innovative and creative and think about those experiences. That is going to allow for Black students and students of color to see themselves in a way that they are not being seen, and grounded ourselves in identity and culture, and that voice. But how do we reimagine what that high school experience is like for young people that is much different, that is actually going to prepare them to be in spaces and places where they feel strong about who they are and what they bring to the table?
Um, So a question that just came in, I really liked, I would love to pose to our alumni panel. Are there, I think it's a question about the relationship between your college and your high school. And I'm curious, one, I'm going to adapt a little bit from your perspective, do you know of any collaboration that was happening between your high school and your college? If so, what was that? If not, I'm curious, what would you maybe particularly think should have happened or could have happened that you think would be helpful in your transition?
Okay, so with me, I feel like in actuality, my ISU did indeed collab with Morgan Park because it was Hope Chicago.
Mhm.
But one thing that I feel like that should have been improved or should have been done was for some of the interactions, it felt like they were just getting to the work and not getting to actually know the individuals and get to actually know them to be able to set them up for college correctly, because everybody is different, everybody brains work differently, everybody has different motives and different motivations and things like that. So I feel like being able to know each student, that is a perfect way to get them the correct guideline to be successful in college. And with that being said, them not being able to understand each student is probably the reason why students are struggling when going to college, because they don't know what to expect.
Right.
Um, I'm not sure if
Mhm.
folks from Julian were in contact with USC, or I don't think that there is a partnership between USC and Julian. I think that, however, it is really important for schools across CPS, especially in Black and Brown neighborhoods on our South and West sides, to be in partnership with schools in places where we dream of, but where white people and where non-Black people casually kind of have connections to. And I only say that because of the amount of like exposure to material and the exposure to kind of just, I've just had this kind of changing of worldview. And I think that had there been a connection, I would have felt a little bit more prepared.
Yeah.
However, I'm just grateful and blessed to be here. So yeah.
Ernie,
I also don't think my school, like Noble and St. Olaf, had a connection, but I do remember like Noble inviting like certain like speakers from certain colleges to come speak to us about why we should choose to go to their school. And I do remember my junior year, someone from St. Olaf coming and talking, but it didn't really stick out to me because I didn't really expect myself to go to St. Olaf. Um, but I don't know, like a lot of people that went to Noble went to Urbana. Like a lot of my friends went to Urbana. Like Urbana is like a really big school for a lot of CPS kids will go to. So I thought that I was gonna go to Urbana. Um, yeah, so there was really much, it wasn't really much of a connection, but there are definitely like a lot of Noble reaching out to schools to come speak to us was definitely a big thing.
appreciate that. And we got to add this on, I think, topic at hand, I think we've been talking a lot, right? It's not just about getting to college, right? But it's really for students that are choosing, particularly Black students that are choosing college, helping them finish. And so, again, for any of our panelists, but what are some of the things you think, particularly our partners, universities, right? Folks that are on college campuses, whose jobs it is to support you. What are some of the things that you think they can do to help improve those sense of belonging?
Definitely having like every student or have a class, like a mandatory class or something for every student at the college for like equity or like anything based on like different demographics of students going to the college. Um, I just feel like when you're especially going out of state, you're meeting new people from different parts of the U.S. or mainly like most likely you might go to a PWI. And your experiences can be very detrimental to definitely like mental health or anything. I had some friends that experienced stuff like this when going to St. Olaf, coming from CPS, coming from Chicago or other um, urban cities in the US, and just having like admissions or any higher ups in the college to allow them to create like a curriculum for the student body to better like equip everyone to be more of a community and not be more separate. Because St. Olaf was very separate in terms of race. Um, and it was pretty detrimental to a lot of different students. But yeah.
For me, I would say, to piggyback off some of the stuff that he said, when it comes to ISU, they make it very known that they have groups and things like that, especially when it comes to major popularity and things like that. Even with the nursing major, even though we're one of the top, they still kind of keep it segregated. And I don't like that because I don't like putting people down. And it's like when you are seen kind of negotiating and talking to people that aren't in your circle, it makes it worse. If that makes sense, it kind of makes it fall back on you. And I understand it's not really a university problem, it's a individual problem and a mentality problem on top of that. So with that being said, I feel like when it comes to a university, they should take more initiative into making it known that you are not by yourself, even if you are undeclared, even if you don't have friends, even if you're just coming out there to start a new life and start a new college, to make it known that you're not alone and divided upon everybody else. Because when I came into college, even though I came with my friends, I still felt alone and I still felt acquainted to everybody else, and it kind of made it harder for me to socialize because I was like, for example, like, can I talk to you guys without being a problem with your other friends and things like that? Or can I ask you about your major and it don't fall back on me? Or even with the fraternities and sororities and things like that. So I feel like as well as it is a university problem, it also plays back on the people in the university itself. So that problem can only be solved with everybody coming together as one.
I would say for me, the biggest like disconnect that I've been having is like there is no connection between the Black student population and the Black faculty here. There's no like kind of like mentor mentee kind of vibe going on. There's no like making sure like USC makes sure that we have so many internships and resources and scholarships and etc. Everything but Black, like Black centered, African American centered. And it just bothers me a little bit. And I think it bothers me because I come from spaces like that. And so now being without that has been a little hard for me. I of course like have had my regular like cliche things with friends, but I think for me it has been the lack of adults. It has been this disconnection, especially right now with the political moment that we're in. There's just so much like diverting of people. They like I'll be in classes and kids don't raise their hands anymore. Professors are like, we're not talking, we're not accumulating knowledge, we're not collecting knowledge, we're not sharing knowledge. It's just it's so like robotic to me. And I don't know, maybe if that's West Coast culture and we're just used to doing things differently in Chicago. I don't know if people are, you know, like have certain mindsets here, but that has for me been my biggest thing that needs accommodating.
I mean, Caitlin,
I
this is
kind of want to, oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead,
I
go ahead.
kind of want to add on that because she kind of just scratched my brain. When it comes to that, I feel like when it comes to me, when I first went to my first class in nursing school, it was nobody in there that was my color but me. And when I first walked in, it's like everybody eyes turned to me and I became the outlier. So I feel like when it comes to that, people need to realize that yes, people can be smart. Yes, people can be not necessarily above you, but on the same level as you. And it's not really a competition if we all succeed at the end.
I appreciate that. Thank you all for that perspective. And I think, Caitlin, the last point, and something you talk like, this is also a reason why we want y'all to come back to Chicago too. When you all finish, right? It's the greatest city in the world. So come on back when you all are done, and we'll keep it up. And thank you. We are unfortunately out of time. But I want to leave us with just a couple of things. Again, we the expectation we're not going to solve anything on this call, right? But I think I know one of our student alumni said this, like, this is part of the work, right? I think doing this, having these conversations, continuing to center this, continue to figure out our learning, and most importantly, continue to figure out what are our individual takeaways in this, right? And so would love to leave us with these questions, right? Don't have to answer all of them, but for yourself would always push us, for each of us, to think deeply about, from things we heard today, the data of both the numbers and also the stories that we heard. What is an action that you can take, or your organization can take, to help us make progress here? And as always, one of those actions is also just continuing to, as Eugene said, like, let's continue to be in community and continue to be in communication about this, right? This is a process, this is long-term work, but we are deeply, deeply, deeply appreciative to be able to do it with you all. So thank you. We are at time, and appreciate all of our panelists for joining us today and sharing all the amazing perspective. So thank you all, and hope to see you all soon.